we are going to be talking about global markets, and we're going to go beyond the concept of Hollywood and Bollywood because the rise in cross border collaboration in film and television and pretty much all art forms. It really reflects the escalating integration of cultural, economic activities on a global scale. It coincides with political, economic, technological convergences that we've seen over the past decade or two. Successful content creators from US and India and UK and somewhere in Europe are all coming together in this incredible panel that I am totally intimidated by, to talk about the creative, the technical, the trends, and all things in global markets. I want to start by introducing Simon Sohail Tawfiq. Simon is a British Indian award winning, Emmy nominated producer, educator, and composer. Simon, you are based in New York. Welcome to the panel. Uh, cannot
Thank you
wait to
for
hear
having
your work. Karen Tenkhoff, hello Karen, is the creative producer and production executive on numerous films. I mean, incredible films. Motorcycle Diaries, which won the British Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, The Clearing, The Spy Game, Legend of Bagger Vance, another one of my most favorite, and Horse Whisperer. Oh my God, you seem to have made most of my favorite movies. Golden Globe nominees. Thank you for being on the panel and just really looking forward to hearing about your journey and your take on global markets. Sundar Aaron, very pleased to have you on the panel. Lived and worked in India for the past 19 years, though you're originally from America. Aaron is a principal with Locomotive Global, a media company that he founded. And it was recently acquired by Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment. And I want to hear what you're doing next. We have my very own co-conspirator in crime, Apurva Bakshi. She is an international Emmy award-winning producer. She spearheaded the production very bravely of the International Emmy winner Delhi Crime. She has other national award winning films up her sleeve like Shut Up, Sona and Leeches, the Netflix musical What Are the Odds, and the widely watched Facebook original Homespun. This gets more intimidating by the minute. Last but not least, Abhijit Golap. He is the founder and CEO of Octrascan with 17 international patents and several research publications to his name, including Nature. And Abhi has innovated and moved away to having a second career as the founder of the Visha Film Productions, which is an award-winning producer of Marathi cinema. And in this day and age, to go back to investing in regional cinema on a global stage, I find it absolutely fascinating. So it has taken me so long to introduce the panelists because this is, as I said, a very high profile and intimidating panel. Um, but the commonality over here is that each of you transformed from some kind of core business or a studio to producing independently. So I'm trying to explore what triggers major pivots like that. So let me start with you, Karen. Um, where did that pivot in your life come from? If you could tell us a little bit about what you were doing up to that pivot moment and what caused that pivot. Um,
It's Thank you so much, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here. The For me, the pivot happened sort of twice.
yeah.
Initially, out of only out of live action producing, and then I went into animation for a long time, and I was at a very major global studio, and I there was enormous value there and enormous talent, storytelling talent, but for me I wanted to be able to tell different kinds of stories, and that didn't require the buy-in of layers and layers of bureaucracy, shareholders, and all kinds of other external metrics. And so I wanted to be able to tell stories that might be very, very small in scale. I'm just finishing just now executive producing a film about a transgender woman who returns home. It's very small, indie, and that's the kind of thing that just can't be done at larger, just the larger entities often just choose not to do for the perceived issues of audience reach, but I think those are only perceptions. So for me, it was about the kinds of stories I wanted to tell and just kind of product market fit of um, what would make that possible.
Wow. So and the second pivot is coming now.
Sorry, first pivot was out of live action into then, sort of choosing studio life and choosing animation as something different. And then the second pivot came out of animation into returning to doing both independently. So now I do both independent animation and independent film. So it's stories, again, that allows for telling stories on a bit of a smaller, I think smaller scale, but still hopefully with the same reach and the same universality.
And before we move on to other people's stories, just a really quick question, because there's a lot of techno people amongst us, given that we're hosting the conference in Silicon Valley. How do you see the evolution of animation as technology for graphic design and CGI has evolved?
I mean, the possibilities are limitless, especially now as we move into VR, AR. The tech possibilities of storytelling are super exciting to me. The metaverse, Web3, what does it mean when your own avatar is in a new world? Like these are things that we haven't even begun to, truly explore. And I think, but interestingly, I feel like technology is just a tool, just in the way that word processing was a tool to you still have to find the best novelists, whether they write on a piece of paper, with no disrespect to technology. It's just technology is a tool by which for expression, and but the innate storytelling still has to be, that's where it all starts, no matter what technology you use. But I think the visual possibilities made possible by this new technology are extremely exciting.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to move on to Sundar. Sundar, tell us a little bit about your life up till the point where you decided to make the pivot, and what triggered it.
Well, sure. Yeah, I worked for Sony Pictures in LA. First of all, thank you very much for having this really interesting conference. And I wish we could do it in person, but I appreciate
Next time.
engaging everybody on this. So, yeah, next time. So I worked with Sony Pictures in LA for a while on in their international television business. They assigned me to work with the Indian team in our Indian channels business. So moved in 2002 on a 2-year contract, and I just kept renewing because in India so much was happening, and of course it was an exciting frontier. The market was evolving, the industry was evolving before our eyes, and it was hard. It was very addicting to be a professional in the media and entertainment industry, and fortunately working for Sony at that time. So I did that for many years, ran channels for Sony, and eventually I reached a point where, honestly, the pivot came when I kind of felt like I'm not equipped to run Hindi television channels, primarily because the content was not something that was exciting to me at that point. If you guys are familiar with broadcast television in India, the programming is very much like, telenovelas or soap operas. So that's when I made the pivot. I decided I wanted to be a producer, independently produce, but I knew that I didn't want to leave India yet and go back to LA. That was the pivot for me. And fortunately, I started off planning to work on genre films, horror movies, romantic comedies like that, small films that I would hope would have a global appeal versus just an Indian appeal. And then shortly thereafter, streaming and everything took off with streaming in India, and I pivoted there. I started working on long form. Long form to me was very exciting. Had a lot of success as a result that, especially is when it comes to streaming and OTT.
I think we're having a little bit of tech trouble hearing you, Sundar. So
Hope that answers the question.
I'll come back to you in just a moment, but there is something that people don't know, that Apurva was actually an intern with Sundar back when. So we'll have to
Sorry,
ask.
guys. I'm sorry about that.
Sundar, I want to ask you, was Apurva a good intern when she interned with you? You don't have to answer that, Apurva. You went from interning with some of the best in the business to suddenly saying, I have the script. None of the platforms, not Amazon, not Netflix, not YouTube, nobody's buying this movie. So what? I'm just going to go ahead and make this series on my own. And then you just very casually won an Emmy for it, and then everybody wanted to buy it. And so, of course, firstly, mind blowing. Secondly, bravo, congratulations. Thirdly, how? Why?
Thank you. I actually was at Sony in Sundar's team first, and then we transitioned. So yes, actually, I have four of you I have worked with or I'm working with currently. So on this panel, and it's just been, all of you are my mentors and collaborators, and I can't wait to unveil to the world what all is coming through. But the trigger for me really was I wrote an email to everybody, and Sundar called me into his office and he said, "Where are you headed? You tell me, where are you headed right now?" And I said, "I'm going to travel the world. I'm really going to I'm just explore travel, because I'm kind of burnt out with the studio life and running the channels." And on my way out, I met Guneet Monga, and in her group of creators, I got hold of this DVD of the film called Placebo. It was a documentary, but that triggered the pivot. I watched it on a flight back to the US, and I could not wait to land to call up the director, Abhay and Archana, to tell them how incredibly important was that film and how inspiring was their journey, because they just picked up the camera and went ahead and made it. They did not wait for anybody to endorse it, to give them the money. They spent 3 years at AIMS, which is the All India Medical Institute, and to understand the psyche of the students who become world-renowned doctors and what it takes to be that person. And then I started understanding distribution issues that independents were facing. So the whole world of independent filmmaking really opened up to me. And I met Richie. I distributed a lot of these independents on platforms like Netflix and Amazon first. And then I read Delhi crime scripts, and they just blew me away. And I told him that even though I might not be a full-fledged bona fide producer, I will be one, because I will make this happen. And everybody knows the story, so I'm not going to repeat it. But no platform was really ready to bet on fresh talent, a very sensitive story, and they just did not have any metrics to be able to judge our capability to be able to pull it off. So I went to a lot of veterans and my mentors in LA, and some partners in India, and we put together the financing and we made it happen. And of course, went to Sundance, and Netflix really loved it. And that was a big shift and pivot as well. So first was from studio to trying to do something for the independents and authentic voices. And now I have a very clear mandate of supporting a certain type of stories that came through. So the pivots keep happening, but fiction to nonfiction as well. I just, a documentary of mine called Women of My Billion is out there. I'm going to do a plug-in. Anybody in India who's watching us, please watch it this weekend. It's live on the Mommy platform. But it is, Placebo inspired me to make Womb 8 years later, right? And so the inspiration is constant, and the pivots are going to be many. just being a part of this whole effort that you've been putting together for the past 3 years was such an important pivot as well, to be able to welcome all the Valley technocrats into our world as well. So yeah, that was my pivot. Placebo.
Incredible, incredible. It's amazing how one small thing can change a person's life. Abhi, I want to know what changed your direction, because you're a classic Silicon Valley techie, went to IITs, you're a CEO of a tech company, you have so many patents. And then suddenly we find that you've become a producer in India of regional language film, which is highly unusual. And clearly uh, there was a need, there was a market, there was some excitement that you identified in that process that brought you into this world, which I kind of feel you're enjoying. Is it different from your other world? How do the two collide, and what brought that about?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I think the panelists are so great that I'm just feeling like, too much novice in this world of entrepreneurship, of arts and films. But as you said, Vinitha, interestingly, everybody who is born in India and grew in India, he or she always feels that there are two important uh, missions for any person who is from India, right? I mean, one is films, another is cricket. Without these two things, no life is complete for anybody who is associated or connected with India. So you have been always watching the films, you have been always looking at the cricket and from your childhood. And then as a technology guy, I got into the technical field, and then, with all this Stanford education, got into the business side of it. But at the same point of time, I was always continuing to watch the films and, appreciate the films. And whenever I used to look at that kind of a market segment, you see that US has a significant contribution to the films. In fact, as a statistics, almost $10 billion industry is what US entertainment industry is. Whereas if you look at other sectors, Korea and Japan and then India, and India stands somewhere around $2 billion in the films market. Now, from that perspective, India was always rated as some of the significant film markets, as all of us know. But then when I was looking at this film market, I felt that India has almost 45% of the revenues come from the Hindi film, which is like a Bollywood, right? I mean, this is a significantly big industry. But then I come from state of Maharashtra, and there are also a lot of regional film centers who are not only producing the films which are glamorous films, but they are producing a lot of films with a lot of good contents. So if you look at the films where you have Angelina Jolie, or you have people like Shah Rukh Khan, these are all glossy films, but there are also a lot of films where there are content itself is a hero or heroine of that film. And so with this knowledge that was happening at the back end, as you say, pivot, somebody approached me with the story. And when somebody comes to you, you always start getting involved in that story. And the first story that came to me was about commercialization of the faith, and that is something which happens very often in a country like India. And I was not looking for a story with a topic which is regional. In fact, I was looking for a story which has an international appeal. It can be made in a regional language because it can be well connected with that group. But at the same point of time, since that was my first try, I want to really take it up as a project which can connect with many people. And also, as a producer, I spend less amount of money, right? I mean, that was another motivation for making the film in the regional language. But then I wanted the actors and actresses who are having those international appeal, and that's why we made that film. And in the first film itself, I mean, we won 3 national awards, and for a regional film, this accolade got back after almost 18 years of a gap. And that's where I think it was maybe a fluke, or it was really a good content delivery mechanism. And just to prove that it was not a fluke, I produced another one and another one. So I got into this industry.
And you won more awards, so clearly not a fluke. You have the pulse of the market, and you have the conviction, you have the courage of your convictions to make films where the content becomes the hero. I absolutely love that. And I think in India, we we grew up watching more Bollywood movies than any other kind of movie, but now we're watching Korean films and Japanese films, and why shouldn't we watch a Marathi film or a Telugu film? Or uh, I think the authenticity of the setting requires the language to be regional from anywhere in the globe, whether it's Swedish or Tamil. But the the global nature of the story means that we can watch Parasite, we can watch the Spanish telenovela type drama that I absolutely love called Gran Hotel. We can watch anything, and we've transcended the language barrier, and that's what makes a global market. That's absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to ask now, finally, Simon, Simon Sohail Tawfiq, to bring some music into this conversation.
Well, my pivots didn't always start with music. Music was certainly one of the pivots. So I've been following my nose as the lead for what I should be doing. And so the first pivot was when I was at NYU as an undergrad, writing songs, but thinking that I was going to be an attorney. And then my good friend Bindu introduced me to her good friend M. Night Shyamalan, who was studying at NYU as well. And we became fast friends. And while I thought I was going to become an attorney, he really showed me that my talent as a musician could actually go somewhere. And I saw it in real life with how he was developing his scripts and his projects, and he would take me to his film sets and his classes. And so it was a really great way to shadow someone who was becoming a master at what they did. And then, despite that, I had an affinity for technology, and that came from before college. I started my first business in BMX. I designed bicycle parts, which became quite famous at the time, and but I left all of that behind to focus on school, like a good Indian boy should. And so, and to fast forward to today, those parts that I made so many years ago are now on the black market. I was selling them for $15 out of my bedroom. They're now going for $2,000 on eBay. So it's a very fascinating little segment of what I was doing. But I caught the bug of entrepreneurship, and so while I was fiddling around with music, I ended up inventing a technology. It was for CRM technology. So I thought I was going to be Abhi. I thought I was going to be that technologist and entrepreneur. I had a patent pending business model and took that quite far. And then the next pivot happened, which was 9/11. And with 9/11, I lost a classmate. I lost a student. I was teaching technology at NYU. And I realized that dream I had for making music someday, I was going to save my money in technology, and I was going to then leave all of that and someday focus on music. And 9/11 and the loss of that at that event told me that it has to happen now. I can't wait for a tomorrow that may never happen. And so quite immediately, I ended up leaving my role. I was running a tech startup called greenbutton.com. I left that world and dove headfirst into music. And quite immediately, I was asked by some friends to write music for their film. And then that led to another film, and one success led to another. But I couldn't let my entrepreneur background go, even though I was trying to. I was trying to be focused as an artist. And in working in independent film, even as the composer, I could see that the producers, the filmmakers, they could use some help. They could use more financing. They could use some more strategic help. They could use some more exposure. And so I rolled up my sleeves, as any good entrepreneur would, and started bringing in financing. I started meeting with distributors and helping them strategize their festival plan. And then quite quickly ended up being asked to produce. And so one thing led to the other, not with any grand plan, but simply following my nose, seeing where opportunities were opening up and trying to do the best that I could, and had an affinity for, some sort of skill for, but more than anything, it was really driven by a passion and an interest. Uh, Luckily, I've had some taste, enough so that the projects and the people that I've worked with have been really talented, and these projects have gone to, they've been seen, they've won awards. But I certainly didn't have the training to be able to say, oh yeah, it's because I went to this conservatory or because I studied under that person. All of it was just very much led by a passion and the good grace of some great collaborators. So I've had some very many pivots, and artistry and opportunities really been the driver.
Incredible. Where is that very classic aquiline nose pointed right now, Simon?
It is my new venture, along with composing and producing and teaching, is a venture called BTS, which stands for behind the scenes. And we are developing and building massive media campuses around the world because there is a shortage of places to shoot all of these films and TV shows that everyone is clamoring for from the streamers. So we are building these massive, these are facilities that are several times the size of football stadiums. They're also education centers so that people who did not have or cannot access the world of entertainment becoming part of this world where we can create or help create these stories, they can have access to it. So what we're doing is creating a place where the streamers and the big studios can make their films and TV shows, but also a place where people can find the training and the jobs to be able to work on those projects, because there is a labor shortage. And so we are building these all over the globe, and have some big announcements very soon.
That's incredible, Simon. Thank you for taking the time to lift everybody around you as you rise. It takes somebody with a very big soul and a very big heart to do that. So, on behalf of everybody that you touch, let me start by saying thank you. And I want to move into a very rapid fire round with all the panelists right now. All of you address global markets. You've developed and produced award-winning content. All of that content has spread beyond the traditional core markets. It's appreciated across the globe. And so I'm just going to go around the room and call on people, and you tell me, what are the top 2 ingredients that somebody needs to infuse the content to allow for such ubiquity? So I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds to think about it, and then I'm going to start with Karen. Since you are a writer developer of the actual content, let's start with you. 2 ingredients that one needs to infuse content with to ensure geographic global ubiquity in buy-in.
It's a really interesting question, because I would say my first answer is simple, like is actually the universal lies in the specific, right? So that whatever is emotionally relatable, specific characters. But as a writer and creator who has now written something for what's meant to be for the Hindi market, I also came to understand, sorry, I'm giving a little bit of a longer answer, but to understand my own shortcomings culturally as not being, a native South Asian, that, it's a bit like if someone who didn't go to an American high school wrote an American there still needed to be like a cultural pass at the content. But I think the core of what gives ubiquity is just emotional specificity. I guess that's my answer. But it says that it doesn't necessarily live in isolation, because there are still cultural factors that need to make something feel authentic to its original core audience, not then the outward audience from there. I hope that makes sense. And I'm sorry that was longer than 10 seconds.
Total sense. Emotional specificity and cultural context. That's brilliant. Simon, you're in the business of making the content reaches, all of these audiences, or you were. So what are your top 2 choices of characteristics of
I would say that I'll echo what Karen just said, which is, but for me, it's a hyper focus on being specific to the world in which you inhabit. So rather than thinking about ubiquity and how this will reach a wider audience, I look at those stories that are hyper specific and authentic, so that it will work and it will be believable in that market. And then if you look at examples of how films and stories have expanded to a global market, it's not necessarily that they were conceived of as being mainstream or wide appeal. They were very specific, but the passion, the authenticity communicated that this is a great story. The other piece is originality. And that is, for me, what makes it stand out. And whether it's coming from Korea or coming from the Ukraine or coming from New York City, it has to feel like I've never seen something like this before. And it doesn't matter where it's coming from.
Brilliant. Sundar, you have the pulse of many, many markets. What would you say?
Well, a couple in particular, US and India, but I'll try to give a bit of a different answer because I obviously agree with everything Simon and Karen said in spades. So I'll try to add something to that. First, I would say is ambition. If you want to make something that is going to speak to multiple markets, you have to have that ambition. And you have, yes, you have to be hyper local and focused, because thankfully that's what everybody wants, authentic stories now. So for sure you have to be authentic, but you have to have that ambition that you're speaking to one specific viewer who is going to be watching your show or your film, whatever it is. The other thing is, I think you have to have the network to be able to bring in talent from abroad. For our shows, we try to marry US or UK writers or co-producers with our projects. That naturally elevates a show, no matter how hyper local or focused or authentic it is, to kind of go across borders. I think Apurva did it excellently with Delhi Crime and with Richie Mehta, and I think if you look at the credit roll there for Delhi Crime, you'll see very interesting, you know, there's talent from around the world probably that are playing key roles in the BTL, in the below the line team that she's got. So I think that kind of a commitment, that's critical as well. Sorry, I kind of went on a little longer too.
No, that's very, very insightful. Thank you. Abhi, you nailed the specificity, you nailed the emotionality with your very first film. So clearly you agree with all of that. What two other factors maybe do you think?
Yeah, so maybe I will give the answer to this question not as somebody, as an artist like all of you, but more like an entrepreneur, which is my core part here. I would say that the answer to this question from my perspective is novelty and delivery. And Simon actually touched upon that topic also as an originality.
Originality, yes.
So he did say originality, but I would say novelty and the delivery. And that is because, you know, you can always present your own topic in a much different way. But then that is where I think the art of a director comes into place. And I think that is where me as an entrepreneur, I would look at the team who can actually create the contents. And then I would look at the team who can deliver the contents. Now, in this world of pandemic or the post-pandemic, I think with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu's and other delivery platforms helping a lot in delivering those contents, you can see that more and more original contents, novel contents are actually surfacing. And that's where I would go with still, like, you know, who is making it and how are they delivering it?
Very, very important. Yeah. Thank you. Apurva, come back to
all of the above. I know, all of the above. Everybody's covered on most of the parts: authentic, original, hyper focused.
No,
I would definitely
own. You can't cop out by saying you believe everybody else. We all
No, I
believe.
am. I am going to bring in a little bit of a distribution angle here, but yes, it was truly collaborative. I think when you send out a piece of written material, so obviously first task is to be able to work with your creator to really, really bring it to a place where you feel that as a producer you've checked off your marks, check marks on it's authentic, it's original, and it's gonna really relate emotionally. And the characters are very compelling, the world is very compelling, and the plot is very, very, appropriately placed in terms of pace. But what comes next is people who bite into the material, and collaborations was truly it was a very difficult material to shoot, but it was an incredible team. Our average age on set was 27 years old. We were young. We wanted to really pivot, except for Richie, who was 38, 39. He'll hate if I say that, but I was 34 that time. And of course, the financiers and producing partners here in LA are older and with a lot of wisdom. But on the set, that was the young tribe who had not attempted to do that before. And then collaboration around the world, once you started seeing the footage flowing into their systems, came together. And it was one of the most I have not worked in a team where there's chaos. It was chaos in terms of fighting for the best output. It was not because we did not know how to work with each other. So that collaboration is very crucial. It shows on screen. And many examples like Gully Boy, and a lot of those sets, you know what the set life or a community would look like Abhi also mentioned, the right team. The second, which I think I would suggest, it's a very simple tool: subtitle your material exceptionally well. I think it is the most stated and the most and actually, frankly, an ignored part of just adopting a better distribution strategy is to first and foremost sit down and idiomatically subtitle your piece of content very well so that it travels far and wide. It has to be authentic, it has to be local, hyper local, but people across the world have the same struggles and emotions and feelings, and they would want to relate to it if they understand it in their own language. So yeah, that's my one tiny bit that I want to add.
Can I just chime in and say that that is such a good point? We've all seen movies that are atrociously subtitled in our own languages, and it's like amusing, but it's also appalling and so disrespectful to the filmmakers who often had no part in it. So I just want to thank Apurva for bringing that up, because honestly, it's something I don't think about other than when I've been amused by watching something that's terribly subtitled. So, I just think that's a really great point for distribution and helping films to travel, and a very key part of your film's global journey. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think thinking about it in the creative and the collaborative process, not waiting until it's done to be, either dubbed or subtitled later, that's brilliant, because then you start to understand how a nuance might translate or play out in another tongue, and kind of factor that in some way. So, Apurva, awesome. That was, we have 8 incredible factors that everybody can take away and start making their content global and successful. And so now let's talk money. We haven't talked money in this panel, and money in an entrepreneurship summit. Let's not beat about the bush. Money is what makes the world go round. Money is what makes projects. Money is what makes everything happen. But when you go independent, financing becomes a very large part of the challenges that you have to overcome, because there's no network behind you, there's no production house behind you, there's no and each of you in your pivots have been at that some point where the money the question of where to get money from must have loomed very, very large in the greater scheme of things. So how How daunting is that? How do you tackle that challenge? Where do you go from there? Apurva, I'm going to start with you because I know that was the very first challenge you had to face in what became an Emmy Award winning show. And you continue to face that because you refuse to make any but the most uh, authentically heartfelt pieces. And I love that about you. So, how daunting is money?
Uh, to be very honest, not that daunting. I feel like, and maybe because I'm just blessed to have a network of people who listen, who also value young talent. They're not insecure about that. Somebody randomly waking up and sending a good script or a good film. And I do that. I pass that privilege along. I look at every 20-year-old who submits every piece of through Instagram, through Facebook, through their emails, just to be able to honor the spirit of what I was accorded. I was accorded a lot of respect by very, very senior executives in the industry to be heard. And so money is, it's not, I would say not daunting, but a very important tool. Yes, it's extremely disappointing that people would say they love the material and they love the effort, but it's not investable. Um, and maybe that comes from the fact that some people in the team lack experience, or it was too sensitive. They don't want to play in that, with censorship and all that is going on around the world in terms of curbing authentic voices. I feel like just my militant optimism has kept the fire burning of saying, if this door closes, there will be 5 others that I will open, and it just doesn't stop. So I rely on that a lot. But we have to be sensible. I think once you've had that way in, platforms have opened up their worlds to be able to commission original pieces. And all of us have that access right now in the room to executives who trust your judgment on piece of content and will at least have a conversation, if not to pass, which is the most times I always receive a pass on my projects. But then I find independent financiers who really, really believe in the journey, and to be very honest, they've all made money on every project. So I think that track record also is extremely important. Not only do you want to back brave projects for the prestige of it or for the dedication of wanting to support the arts, but also being able to return the investment of your financiers. I think that keeps the rotating fund coming in. So you have to be very strategic, more about not how to find the money, how to manage it, and how to make sure that it becomes a sort of a rotating, a fund in your producing pool, that the people who financed at least broke even, if not made a profit. And thankfully, I've been blessed to have projects that have made money.
It's very
Yeah,
hard to.
sorry.
I said it's very
Yes.
hard to over and over again. Congratulations for that. I see Abhi leaning forward, and Abhi comes
Yes.
from the other side of the story where he's trying to decide where to put money in. And so, Abhi, do you want to take over from the conversation where Apurva stopped and say, what would you fund? And, with 6 different projects looking for that same X dollars that you're willing to put in, how are you going to make that choice?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Apurva said, I think that is like a music to my ears. But then if you look at as a conventional investor, right? I mean, you invest in the technology ventures, you know what you're producing, you know who are you selling with, you know the competitors. And most importantly, the life of the product is pretty long in that case. If you look at the film industry, the life of the product is 2 days or 1 week. So whatever you had to earn it within those time period. And because there is a competition, there are films coming like one after another. And then that is where the investors are actually on a back foot. They just don't feel comfortable investing in this because film business sounds like a risky business, like a gamble for them. They really do not know how do I earn money out of it. And then if I invest this much of money, and then in the first day, if my fate is going to be decided by the audiences, then it's like a big gamble. Now, as an entrepreneur, in fact, that was very exciting for me when this project was provided to me, because that we had to actually create a business model that can make this business sustainable, and more investors can then come into this business model. Now, to a certain extent, that ambition of mine got fulfilled, because when I produced the movie versus what is getting produced now, in the span of those 7 to 8 years, when we got like those 3 national awards, and then today, if you look at it, there are more and more productions now are coming forward and producing number of regional movies like in Marathi. But going back to the dollar value associated with this whole business game or business plan, I think it still requires to decode this business model a bit, because if you look at the investors today, those are either the conventional investors like the film or the media companies. They're investing in this, but there are no individuals, or there are no smaller groups who are trying to enter into this, more like the angels, because they're afraid of losing money. But then with the content delivery mechanism in place, there is at least some kind of a surety now that if you have your contents and if you can get into Netflix or Amazons of the world, then there is at least pay-per-use or some kind of returns that you are going to get. So from that perspective, I think I really appreciate Vinita and Apurva to start this Artrepreneurship as a platform, because I think this will eventually give rise to that business model, which will make film business as a feasible model. And now that you are starting it like the Silicon Valley Artrepreneurship, I think this is the right place to start. There are many investors who are still, watching and saying that, hey, you got it. Okay, you are lucky. You don't get it. Oh, I was telling you anyways, you're not going to get it. So if that kind of a wisdom is happening, I think it's a time for us to change it together. And with the content providers, with so much of bright and smart content providers that are there now, I think it is all about investors who have to now walk extra miles to make this whole business model grow into a mutually beneficial relation.
Yeah, thank you for that, Abhi. I will be popping into your office to continue this conversation with you next week, probably. Sundar, what would you like to add to that particular conversation, given that you spend a lot of you spend a lot of time making choices on what?
Well, let me try to answer the question for people out there who are maybe starting in the business or trying to get a start in the business, because clearly, I mean, Apurva has a great network. So if you have that network and you have a track record, things are going to be a little bit easier once you have something that's really a profound project. But I'll just try to answer it for people who maybe don't have that track record, don't have that. First of all, you can't ignore financing. You need to understand and have a finance plan for your project. You need to understand which markets are going to respond to it. You need to have a very clear understanding of the economics of this. Where is the money going to come from for your particular project? Is it going to come from Netflix India? Is it going to come from Netflix UK or Netflix US? Is it going to come from splitting territories, retaining certain rights, doing deals like that? Is it going to come from a distributor who gives you an MG? So have a plan before you step out and try to get investors. I mean, I think content, especially for India right now, is a great business to get into, because if you have the proficiency to pull off a well-done show, you will be rewarded for it. Everybody can go hat in hand with Netflix and Amazon and the platforms. That's a long, arduous trip. And unless you're making something in a market where the economics are really great, like the UK or the US, in the UK, if you make The Crown, your fees on making it will be $10 to $15 million every season. That's pretty good. If you're making a show in India, however, your fees are going to be a fraction of that. So if you want to independently finance, have a plan, have a real clear idea of who your audience is, and that's really critical. So and hopefully you're a member of TiE, so you can hit up people at TiE for investing.
I was going to say, there seems to be some new financiers on the block who are willing to dip their toe into this market, and hopefully, that toe dipping is going to become a flood, and we're all going to be terribly happy campers. And
and if I can also, Vinita, I'm sorry, I don't want to be evasive also. Let me tell you, I wanted to raise money because I wanted to scale up quickly. So that's why I went out and I cut a deal with Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment. They're a public company that owns a lot of production companies. But I had to, you know, if I don't get working capital in now, then it's going to take me 5 years to grow organically. So I had to have a strategy and a plan for where to go. Okay. Now, there are a lot of companies out there and investors right now that are looking at India and looking at projects that are India related because China is gone.
Yeah.
You can't get anything out of China. Russia is gone now too, of course. So, but the point is that India is the best media market in the world. Fortunately, Indian content is having, you know, Indian talent, I'll say. Indian content hasn't yet really made a big impact around the world, but Indian talent is starting to do that. So there will be more co-productions. There will be more opportunities like that. You just have to have a plan in mind. I mean, my plan was not to wait around and to, you know, go for it now because I wanted to scale up quickly.
Sounds like a really good plan. I'm
Yep.
always on the go for it now plan. I just want to say 3 times we decided maybe we should not do this conference because we wanted to do it in person. And then we said, no, it has to happen now. We're just going to go for it. And here we are chatting. So I know Apurva is with me on this. I'm very much a proponent of go for it now. So thank you for putting that out in the mix. And as Simon said, you know, you don't know what happens tomorrow, so you have to go for it now. And the more you can book now, the better off you are. Absolutely. Karen and Simon, would you like to take a shot at answering the question, or should we move to some questions that the audience has been peppering us with through this conversation?
I'd love to quickly chime in, and Simon, but Simon, I yield to you. So I yield to you, and then we can. I'll
Go
quickly.
for it, Karen. I'll come back to Simon. Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah,
Okay,
Karen.
So I find I love Apurva's militant optimism, and I wish I shared it. And she's a great example and leader in that way. I find money to be an incredible grind, and a challenging grind because, unfortunately, storytelling and filmmaking around the world is littered with, the bodies of unscrupulous, filmmakers, unscrupulous people who didn't know what they're doing, who got their rich uncle's money to do, things that just, and so for all quality, even young filmmaking teams without experience can still have deep quality, deep commitment, and deep ethics. And we all suffer at the expense of those who have gone before us unscrupulously. But I want to say this is such an important summit because entrepreneurship and film financing, just as Sundar has said, you need a plan. Just like if you go to a VC with your startup and you're pitching your idea, you need to, but it's very similar. And I think I wanted to address a little bit the entrepreneurs on the call who may be interested as financiers, that there's a kind of a myth that you need $10 million to make a $10 million movie, which is completely untrue. That if you have a good financing plan with tax credits, with a distribution plan, and with cast becomes in many ways, the talent that you draw to your film is effectively human capital. And it sounds horrible to say that, but I don't mean it in a pejorative way. It's just that they bring value. And so, $3 billion can trigger a $10 million film once you've made cast offers, packaged it together, and also the other thing I would just say to entrepreneurs is to be sure to get, if you know good material, to be sure to find a consultant. You can find, pay someone one day to read a script, assess it, and say, is this good storytelling? Is this director talented? And that's what Apurva was able to do on Delhi Crime. She knew Richie's work. She herself could address that material. But so find an Apurva, find who that person is who can make a qualitative assessment about your quantitative risk, which will deeply mitigate your quantitative risk. And I think that that's just an important, and again, you don't need the full freight of the budget in order to trigger the budget. I think it's something else for potential investors to understand, that you can actually get, your return much more readily than you might think. So I'll leave it at that and pass off to Simon.
And yes, everybody should find an Apurva.
We'll have to clone her. Can Silicon Valley do that? Simon, we want to hear your views.
I'm a big fan of the saying or the idea that a lack of resources can make you more resourceful, and so I think dovetails with the idea or the practice of going for it now. So even as entrepreneurs, we'll see that a prototype is worth its weight in gold because my business plan is still just an idea. But if I can show you what that idea looks like in real life, then you've got something that's now added a whole lot of value because you've demonstrated that you can execute. And that's the difference between the million scripts that are out there and the few that actually have been made. Once you demonstrate that you can execute and that you have a way of telling a story that's going to stand out, then opportunities do open up. And yet it is still a grind to raise money, just as Karen had mentioned, but it's infinitely less of a grind if you can show that you're not just talking about a concept, you're talking about real results. And that has made the difference. I've worked with enough first-time filmmakers to see when they run out of money or their financing went south, they've still made their films with less resources, and they've surprised everyone, most of all themselves, with how good it came out and how much the market was waiting for this kind of story. And a lot of times, if you do your homework and you do your planning, as Sundar has mentioned, for the financing, but also for all of the other creative elements, you might have something that looks far better and has a lot more production value than you think. And as an entrepreneur, you're always hiding your build cost. And if you can do that as a filmmaker, where people ask you, did you spend $2 million on that? It really looks like a $2 million film. And they don't know that you spent 50 grand on it or 250 grand, whatever it is. But all of a sudden, the fact that you put all of those resources, that resourcefulness together, now has catapulted the value to something else. And now money will be a path to your door if you're lucky, if you have the network, if you are resourceful, all of those things that my fellow panelists have mentioned. But you've got to demonstrate.
I just wanna add absolutely agree. I think the hustle in you cannot stop at any point in time, and that's something that starts at as soon as you graduate to the time that you retire in this world. And I deeply appreciate that hustle as well as a well laid out plan. Nobody will go on a concept level. Like nobody will invest in you at a concept level. It has to be thought through and a thorough plan, and then you have to have the hustle. So it's a grind, but it's a good one.
Cut everybody short here because we're coming to the end of our time, but we have been receiving everybody has been listening to this panel, hanging on to every word, and we've been bombarded by questions, and we have run out of time. I have a minute, and so I am going to ask one question which really popped out to me, and I'm going to give everybody a opportunity for a one sentence response because unfortunately that's all the time we have. We could spend all day with this panel, but we have some other incredible speakers that we need to also make time for. So here's the question. The question is, what about short films? Is there a market for that? Is it opening up? Would people want to invest in that? Are more people watching short films? So rapid fire round, I'll call a name, you give me a one sentence response. Karen.
Unclear about the market, but make them anyway.
Okay, Sundar.
Oh, okay. I'm going to take a contrarian approach because people have approached me about short films, and no, there isn't a great market for it. There is a market, but it's not a great market. If you are using it as a showcase of your talent, then I understand that's the upside of it. But as far as the economics, sometimes, the effort that you can put into a short film, you might as well do a small indie film. Nowadays, the
Okay, now you
Oh,
only get
sorry, one sentence. Right. Right. Sorry.
that's okay. Thank
I'll
you.
shut up now.
Insightful. Simon.
You're not investing in a product, you're investing in people.
Okay. That's a very brilliant answer, Abhi.
Short films are good for writers and directors and actors to showcase their talents. It's not yet proven business model for investors and producers.
Okay, Apurva.
Pick up an iPhone and go and shoot it with an iPhone. Stop using big pieces to tell your story well. You don't need a lot of money. And if you don't have if Sean could make an Oscar nominated film on an iPhone, so can you. So stop wasting money and make it for the talent and to understand who you work well with and build teams to make a first independent film after that. So, yeah.
So Mr. Rishabh Thakkar, thank you for asking that question. I hope you got the response that you needed. And thank you everybody for staying within time almost and working with me to share your lives, your dreams, your insights, and most of all the advice to the people that you are. Like I said, I was intimidated at the top of the panel. I'm even more intimidated now, but I want to meet each and every one of you over lunch and talk so much more. Thank you and hope to do it again soon. I want to hand it over to Apurva for our next session, which is, I don't know what, but Apurva will tell us. And thank you to all the audience members who are staying with us in these incredibly critical conversations.
Thank you.